Listen, I have to share something with you that took place out of public view at the White House that almost no one is discussing. Two men entered a room together. One of them misrepresented what occurred when they came back out. And what makes this truly unbelievable is that both of them are still misrepresenting it right now. Here's what we can confirm. Trump's Treasury Secretary appeared on national television and said one version of events. Canada's Prime Minister immediately pushed back against it. And the reality sits somewhere between those accounts, and it's far more dangerous than either side wants to admit. So let me rewind to January 20th, 2026. Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum. You know, the event where the planet's most powerful figures gather to act like they care about everyday people while eating caviar and cutting deals that impact billions of lives. Mark Carney steps up to the podium and doesn't hold back. He stands there and essentially announces that the American world order is finished. Not fading, finished. He says the rules-based system that's kept relative peace since World War II is over. And he does it without saying Trump's name even once. But everyone in that room knew exactly who he meant. Now, what I'm about to show you changes everything, because Trump is sitting in the White House watching this, and he's livid. The following day, he fires back. Says Canada only exists because of the United States. Says Carney should be thankful. And then this is where things get interesting. He pulls Carney's invitation to something called the Board of Peace. Yes, apparently that actually existed. But here's what no one saw coming. A week later, Trump grabs the phone and calls Carney. They speak for 30 minutes. And when the call ends, both sides give completely different accounts of what was said. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent goes on Fox News. This is the man responsible for all of Trump's economic policy. And he says, and I quote, Carney was very aggressively walking back his Davos remarks. Walking them back, meaning he apologized, meaning he backed down. But wait, it gets worse. The very next morning, Carney steps in front of reporters in Ottawa and says, to be absolutely clear, and I said this to the president, I meant what I said in Doves. No apology, no retreat. The exact opposite of what Bususin had just claimed on national television. So someone is lying. Either Trump's Treasury Secretary invented a story about a phone call, or Canada's Prime Minister is pretending he held his ground when he actually folded. And both possibilities are terrifying when you think about what's at stake, because this isn't just about bruised egos or political drama. We're talking about the economic relationship between two countries that exchange $2.7 billion in goods every single day. Every single day? That's not a mistake. Now, what I'm about to tell you will sound crazy. Reports say Trump slapped tariffs on Canada at 25%, then 35%. And at one point he threatened to raise them to 50% on steel and aluminum. 50%. Do you grasp what that implies? That's not a negotiating move. That's economic warfare. Canadian factories began shutting down. Thousands of jobs vanished in Ontario alone. The aluminum sector was crushed. Forestry workers were laid off. And all of this because these two men can't sit in a room and reach an agreement. But that's not even the real story. The real story is what happened when they finally met face to face. This is the part that kept me awake last night, because in early February, Carney flies to Washington. It's his second visit to the White House since becoming Prime Minister. And before the meeting, Trump is doing his usual routine, telling reporters Carney will leave very happy, saying, Canada and America have mutual love. Smiling for the cameras, they go into the Oval Office, just them and their teams. And when they emerge, once again, two completely different versions of what happened inside. Official readouts say the meeting was constructive and substantive. They'll continue working on deals covering steel, aluminum, and energy. Cabinet members will quickly land agreements in the coming weeks. Standard diplomatic language that means absolutely nothing. But then you start hearing what was actually said in that room, and it's not pretty. Trump tells Carney there's a natural conflict between Canada and the United States, not competition conflict. He says both countries want the same thing, steel production and car manufacturing, and therefore they can't both win. Carney tries to soften the message, says they compete but are stronger together. A classic diplomatic pivot, but you can see it in his face in the photos. This isn't going well. And then Trump, because of course he does, brings up the 51st state idea again. Jokes that if Canada just joined America, all the tariff issues would vanish. Carney has to sit there and act like it's funny. Here's what no one is talking about. This entire saga began with that Davos speech. Carney stood on that stage and said, "Middle powers, countries like Canada, need to band together because if they don't, they're on the menu." His exact words, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." He talked about how the rules-based order was always partly a fiction, how America exempted itself when convenient, how international law was enforced differently depending on who broke it. And he said, all of this needs to stop. Countries need to stop pretending, stop putting signs in windows just to avoid trouble. It was one of those speeches that earns a standing ovation in the room, but creates enemies in Washington. And Trump doesn't forget that kind of thing. So, let's talk about what's really happening. Because the surface story, the one about tariffs and trade talks, isn't the real story. The real story is about power. Who has it? Who's losing it? And what they're willing to do to hold on to it. Carney knows something most people don't want to admit. America isn't the same hegemon it was 20 years ago. And Trump is accelerating that decline by weaponizing the economy. Every tariff, every threat, every late-night social media post, it's all speeding up the very thing Trump claims he's trying to stop. Here's where it gets complicated. Canada sits on resources the world desperately needs. Energy, critical minerals, the materials that go into batteries, semiconductors, and everything that powers modern life. And Carney is out there cutting deals with everyone. China, Qatar, India, you name it. Trump initially told him to do it. He actually encouraged Carney to pursue a trade deal with China, said it would benefit Canada. But then Carney delivered that DVO speech, and suddenly Trump flips completely. Now he's threatening 100% tariffs if Canada enters a broader trade deal with China. 100%. That would effectively shut down trade between the two countries overnight. And then this happened. Carney goes to Beijing and negotiates a deal to cut tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. In return, China rolls back some of its retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood. It's a limited deal, not a full agreement, but it works for both sides. Trump loses it, starts posting about Canada becoming a drop-off port for China, claiming Chinese goods will flood into America through Canada. Never mind that Canada and the U.S. have a trade agreement that explicitly prevents that. Never mind the facts. Trump goes into full attack mode. But that's not even the wildest part. The wildest part is what's happening to the relationship itself. Canadian tourism to the United States has fallen sharply. People aren't crossing the border like they used to. Some Canadian stores have pulled American products from their shelves in protest. There's a growing feeling among Canadians that they've been betrayed by their closest ally. And here's what you need to understand about Canada and America. These aren't just neighboring countries. They're integrated in ways most nations could never be. Supply chains cross the border multiple times for a single product. A car part might travel back and forth between Michigan and Ontario 3 or 4 times before the vehicle is finished. So when Trump slaps tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, he's not only hurting Canada. American companies pay those tariffs. American consumers pay higher prices. American workers lose jobs because their employers can't afford the materials they need. This is the definition of a lose-lose scenario. Now, what I'm about to show you changes everything. In that White House meeting, Trump made one thing crystal clear. He said he wants to stop importing cars and steel from Canada, not reduce it. Stop it. He wants American production. Full stop. Carney tries to explain that this isn't how modern manufacturing works. You can't just flip a switch and relocate entire industries. It takes years, even decades, and the cost would be astronomical. But Trump doesn't care. He has this vision of bringing everything back to America, making the country produce everything domestically, and any nation that gets in the way becomes an economic enemy. Wait, it gets worse. Trump floated the idea of scrapping the entire USMCA agreement. That's the trade deal between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico that he negotiated during his first term, his signature trade achievement. And now he's talking about ditching it in favor of separate deals with each country. Do you know why? Because bilateral deals give him more leverage. When Canada and Mexico negotiate together under USMCA, they're stronger. They can coordinate and push back. But if Trump splits them up and negotiates separately, he can play them against each other. It's classic strongman strategy, divide and conquer. But here's what no one is discussing. Carney isn't backing down. Despite what Besson said on Fox News, despite the tariffs and threats, Carney is building what he calls strategic autonomy. and that directly challenges American dominance. He's signing trade agreements on 4 continents, 12 new deals in 6 months. That's unprecedented for Canada. And every one of those agreements sends a message to Washington. We don't need you as much as you think. Sources now confirm that Carney told Trump all of this during their phone call. He laid it out clearly, said, Canada understands the world has changed and Canada is adapting with it. And that's likely what triggered Besson's claim that Carney was walking back his remarks. Because from Trump's point of view, any admission that America still matters counts as a retreat. He doesn't grasp nuance. You're either fully with him or completely against him. This is the part that terrifies me. We're watching the unraveling of one of the most successful alliances in modern history. Canada and America have been partners for more than a century. They fought wars together, built the world's longest undefended border, created the most integrated economy on Earth, and it's falling apart over ego and misunderstanding. Documents show that during the White House meeting, Carney offered $1 trillion in Canadian investment in the United States over the next 5 years. $1 trillion money for infrastructure, manufacturing, and jobs in American communities. Trump's response: he wants guarantees first. He wants the trade deals settled before any investment flows. He's holding the relationship hostage for better terms. And Carney is sitting there thinking, I just offered you $1 trillion and you're still talking about tariffs. The latest information shows that after the meeting, officials stayed in Washington to continue negotiations. Carney even had dinner with Vice President J.D. Vance. They're trying to break through on steel, aluminum, and energy specifically. But no one is optimistic because Trump isn't interested in incremental wins. He wants total victory. And total victory over Canada means destroying the partnership that made both countries prosperous. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. Trump keeps calling this a natural conflict, as if it's inevitable that Canada and America fight over resources in manufacturing. But it's not natural at all. It's manufactured. Trump created this conflict by choosing to view Canada as a rival instead of a partner. Okay, so we need to go back to the moment when everything actually broke, because I've told you about the Davos speech and the White House meeting, but something else happened that changes how you see all of this. The phone call, the one where Besson says Carney backed down and Carney says he didn't. I want you to really understand what that implies. Think about it. The Treasury Secretary of the United States goes on one of the biggest news networks in the country and makes a specific claim. He says he was in the Oval Office when Trump spoke to Carney, and he states that Carney was aggressively walking back his Davos speech. That's not a throwaway remark. That's an official statement from a senior administration figure designed to send a message. Canada blinked. Canada caved. America won. But then Carney stands in front of Canadian media the very next morning and says the exact opposite. Not that there was a miscommunication. Not that the conversation was productive. He directly says he meant what he said in DVOS. Now, here's where this gets really disturbing. Both of these men are professionals. Besson ran one of the largest hedge funds in the world. Carney served as governor of both the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. These aren't amateurs making sloppy mistakes. They know exactly what they're doing. So, why the contradiction? And more importantly, what does it reveal about the true state of U.S.-Canada relations? I think the answer is simpler and more frightening than anyone wants to admit. They aren't even speaking the same language anymore. Trump's team views every conversation as an opportunity to claim victory. Carney's team views the same exchange as holding firm. And the reality is both sides are playing to their domestic audiences. Besson needs to tell Trump's base that Canada was put in its place. Carney needs to tell Canadians he didn't bow to American pressure. And neither side cares that their stories don't align, because the people watching Fox News aren't the same ones reading Canadian headlines. But that's not even the real problem. The real problem is what this means for actually solving issues. Here's what no one is telling you. In normal diplomacy, both sides agree on what happened in a meeting before speaking publicly. They coordinate statements. They ensure their accounts match, not to hide anything, but to build trust and maintain relationships. But Trump doesn't operate that way. He'll say one thing privately and then rewrite the story in public if it makes him look stronger. And Carney has learned he can't trust that anything said in the Oval Office will remain there or be accurately described later. So now you have two countries that can't even agree on what they agreed to. How do you negotiate trade deals like that? How do you build a security partnership when you can't rely on the other side's word? Officials now say the focus of the White House meeting was finding tangible progress on trade in steel, aluminum, and energy. Trump and Carney directed their teams to quickly land agreements in those areas. But quickly land agreements is diplomatic code for we didn't settle anything. So we're passing it to staff, and everyone knows it. And then this happened. Trump began talking about the upcoming USMCA review. The trade agreement is scheduled for review in July 2026. And instead of saying they'll work together to improve it, Trump is floating the idea of letting it expire. Letting it expire. The deal that governs hundreds of billions of dollars in trade every year, employs millions of people on both sides of the border, took years to negotiate, and was meant to give businesses certainty. Trump treats it like it's nothing, like he can walk away and strike something better on the fly. Carney's response: he accelerates diversification. Those 12 trade deals I mentioned, that's Plan B. That's Canada preparing for a world where America is no longer a dependable partner. But here's the twist you didn't expect. Some of Trump's own advisors are panicking over this because they understand Canada isn't Mexico. Canada isn't even China. Canada is America's largest supplier of oil. 60% of U.S. crude oil imports come from Canada. 85% of U.S. electricity imports come from Canada. You can't replace that overnight. If Trump pushes Canada away, American energy prices skyrocket. Power grids in northern states become unstable. Refineries built specifically for Canadian crude would need massive retooling. And all of that costs money, huge amounts of money American companies and consumers would have to pay. So you end up with Trump threatening to blow up the relationship for political gain while policy experts around him try to stop an economic disaster. Reports say that during the White House meeting, Trump did what he always does. He dominated the discussion, jumping from government shutdowns to California's high-speed rail project to Gaza. Classic Trump, bouncing from topic to topic without resolving anything. Carney, known for running tight, efficient meetings, just sat and listened because what else can you do? You don't tell the President of the United States to stay on topic. And meanwhile, the real issues, tariffs, trade, border security, barely get meaningful attention. It's all surface level, all performance for the cameras. Wait, it gets worse. Trump made 30 references to Canada becoming the 51st state during this period. 30, sometimes joking, sometimes sounding half serious. And every single one undermines Carney at home, because there are Canadians who actually worry about this not annexation, but economic absorption. Canada becoming so dependent on the U.S. that it effectively loses sovereignty. Trump playing with that fear, even as a joke, is psychological warfare. It's a reminder that America is bigger, stronger, and could theoretically take what it wants. Carney has to keep pushing back. Keep saying Canada will never be for sale. Keep asserting independence. But every time he does, it reinforces the imbalance. This is the part that kept me up last night. What we're seeing is the collapse of the assumption that shared values and interests automatically mean alliance. For 70 years, Canada and America operated as natural partners. Democracy, free markets, NATO, the entire Western alliance framework. But Trump's presidency has shown that none of that matters if one leader decides it doesn't. He can threaten allies, praise dictators, break agreements, and shift policy based on whatever he watched on TV that morning. And once trust is broken, it doesn't magically return when someone else is elected. Carney is building those alternative trade relationships because he knows even if Trump loses in 2028, Trumpism isn't disappearing. The next Republican president could do the same or the one after that. So, let me tell you where this is heading, because the scary part isn't what's already happened. The scary part is what comes next. The USMCA review begins in July. That's less than 6 months away. And heading into those talks, Canada and the United States aren't even aligned on what their current relationship is, let alone where it's going. Trump will demand better terms for American agriculture, lower tariffs on U.S. goods entering Canada, maybe changes to dispute resolution that make it easier for America to win. Carney will push for certainty, an end to sectoral tariffs, protection from Trump's unpredictable policy swings, and guarantees that rules won't change every time Trump gets angry, and neither side will get everything they want. Here's what's really likely to happen. Negotiations will drag on for months, maybe beyond the July deadline. There will be dramatic moments when talks seem to collapse. There will be last-minute saves where both sides declare victory. And in the end, they'll probably extend the agreement with minor tweaks. Both sides will claim they won because the alternative, actually ending USMCA, is too economically destructive to seriously pursue. But here's the thing. Even if they save the deal, the damage is already done. Canadian businesses are already looking elsewhere. They're exploring Europe, Asia, and building supply chains that don't depend on stable U.S. relations because they've learned those relations aren't stable anymore. And once that shift starts, it's very hard to undo. Even if the next U.S. president is friendlier, even if relations improve, those alternative supply chains will remain. Businesses will keep them because diversification lowers risk. Sources now confirm that Canadian pension funds, some of the largest investment pools in the world, are slowly reducing their exposure to the U.S. Not dramatically, not in headline-grabbing ways, but steadily and deliberately shifting money into other markets. That's a big deal. Canadian pension funds have been among the largest foreign investors in American infrastructure, real estate, and businesses for decades. If that capital flows elsewhere, it affects everything from Manhattan office towers to Texas toll roads. Now, what I'm about to tell you sounds insane. There are people in Trump's inner circle who actually want this. They believe America should be economically independent from everyone, including Canada. They see the integrated North American economy as a liability, not a strength. And they're telling Trump he can play hardball because Canada needs America more than America needs Canada. That's true in absolute terms. But it misses how modern economies function. You can't unwind decades of integration without enormous costs. And those costs would hit American workers and communities just as hard as Canadian ones. But that's not even the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part is the signal this sends to the wider alliance network. If America treats Canada this way, its closest ally and biggest trading partner, what message does that send to everyone else? Why would Germany trust security guarantees? Why would Japan believe trade commitments? Why would anyone make long-term plans based on American promises? Documents show other middle powers are watching Canada closely. Australia, South Korea, European countries, all asking themselves, could this happen to us? And the answer is increasingly yes. That's why Carney's Davos speech resonated so deeply. He wasn't just speaking for Canada. He was speaking for every country that's realized the rules-based order no longer protects them. The latest information shows Carney is pursuing what he calls values-based realism, working with democratic partners, but not assuming shared values automatically resolve conflicts, being pragmatic about interests while staying principled on rights and sovereignty. It's a middle ground between idealism and cynicism, and it may be the future for countries that aren't superpowers. Here's what no one is talking about. Trump's approach to Canada is speeding up the very trend he claims to oppose. He says he wants America strong and independent, but by pushing away allies, he's forcing them to build alternatives to American power. He's creating the multipolar world that reduces U.S. influence. China is watching and smiling because every country that diversifies away from America is more open to Chinese investment, technology, and partnerships. Russia is watching, too. If America alienates Canada, one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine, what does that mean for the coalition against Russian aggression? Trump doesn't think in second-order effects. He focuses on winning the immediate negotiation, getting the better deal today. But international relations aren't a series of isolated deals. They're a web of relationships that shape each other. Officials now say both countries are preparing for multiple outcomes. Best case, they muddle through the USMCA review and reach a new balance. Worst case, the agreement collapses and they rebuild trade from scratch. And there are scenarios in between. Partial deals sector by sector, different timelines for different issues, a lot of uncertainty that makes business planning nearly impossible. Wait, it gets worse. There's talk of Trump using the USMCA review to push the 51st state idea more seriously. Not annexation, but some kind of economic union where Canada keeps sovereignty but aligns nearly all policies with America. It's never going to happen. But the fact it's even being discussed shows how far the relationship has fallen. Carney has had to spend political capital at home defending his strategy. The opposition is attacking him for being too soft on Trump, for not retaliating harder, for still trying to negotiate instead of walking away. But Carney understands what walking away would cost. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, massive disruption, Years of economic pain while new trade patterns form. So he's trying to thread an impossible needle. Stand up to Trump enough to satisfy Canadians, but not so much that Trump follows through on his worst threats. Tough but pragmatic, principled but realistic. And honestly, I don't know if it's working because at the end of the day, you can't have stability with someone who doesn't value it. You can't plan long-term with someone who changes course based on cable news. You can't build trust with someone who publicly contradicts private conversations. This is the part that scares me most. We're watching the collapse of assumptions that have guided international relations for generations. That allies stick together. That shared interests lead to cooperation. That economic integration promotes peace. All of those ideas are being tested right now in real time with real consequences. And the truly frightening part is we don't know what comes next. We don't know what the world looks like when those assumptions no longer hold. Carney is betting that middle powers can band together and build their own order, their own rules, their own partnerships that don't rely on American leadership. Maybe he's right. Maybe that's the future. Countries like Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and European nations working together to preserve stability in a world where superpowers are unreliable. Or maybe it all falls apart. Maybe without American leadership, the system fractures into regional blocs, economic warfare, and rising conflict. I don't have the answer. No one does. We're in uncharted territory. So, I want to know what you think. Is Carney right to hold his ground and build alternatives? Or should he be doing more to accommodate Trump and save the relationship? Does this change how you view the situation? What am I missing here? Let me know.